Okay, so welcome to the presentation on familial status brought to you by Project Sentinel, featuring me. My name is Bree Byrne. I'm the Civil Rights Investigations Coordinator, serving Sacramento, Stanislaus counties, and also the city of Merced. Let's give a little bit of background on what Project Sentinel is before we start the presentation. Project Sentinel is a nonprofit agency that can help you resolve your housing issues such as discrimination, mortgage foreclosure, tenant landlord counseling and mediation, home buyer education, and reverse mortgage education. Now, Project Sentinel is an agency that's split into varying departments. So different departments handle different things. For the purpose of this presentation being put on by the Fair Housing branch of the Project Sentinel tree, we cover things primarily discrimination related, and we offer services that would involve and pertain to things like that. So mediation, investigations, things of that nature. But the mortgage foreclosure, that's a separate department. And then tenant landlord counseling, that's also a separate department. So what is fair housing? Fair housing is discrimination in housing, or more specifically, discrimination in advertising, sale or rental of housing, terms or conditions of housing, termination of tenancy. It must be based on a protected class status, and it is not unfair or negative treatment in general. In order for it to be a fair housing issue, it must pertain to a protected class. So another note, the key to discrimination is differential treatment, treating two similarly situated tenants of different protected classes differently without a clear non-discriminatory reason. So let's talk protected categories. There are federal protected categories and there are state protected categories. And the state protected categories also include the federal categories as well. So the states are just add on to the federals. So the federal categories are race and color, national origin, religion, gender, disability, and familial status, which I made a little bit bigger because that is the superstar of this presentation today. And the state categories are marital status, sexual orientation, gender identity, age, source of income, and arbitrary characteristics. Now, arbitrary characteristics are just things like tattoos, the way you wear your hair, things of that nature. So the star of this presentation, familial status, that looks like advertising no children, very plainly. Statements like there are no kids here, different terms and conditions requiring extra deposit, less rent for fewer people, kids can't use certain parts of the complex. So things like that. Overly restrictive rules directed at children. Noise. So oftentimes we'll see noise as grounds for people getting complaints and notices and things of that nature. And if it's attached to children, that is something that we can investigate. So for example, that would look like if your neighbor plays music between the hours of like 3 and 6 every day, full volume, and your kids are home 3 and 6 and they're playing, so you would assume full volume, but you get notices for noise, but your neighbor doesn't, there might be grounds there for a familial status investigation because you would fall under a protected category, which would be having children, because listening to music loudly is in a protected class. Supervision, so stipulations and leases that say your kids can only play outside if you watch them. You cannot give stipulations like that to tenants that's stating that they need to watch their children in order for them to be outside. So that is another grounds we could have for investigation. Playing outside, so stipulations around playing outside, that usually always is grounds for a familial status investigation because you would assume most of the time that it's kids playing outside. So that is grounds. Steering to bottom floor units or certain parts of the complex. Regardless of your protected class or category, in order for fair housing to be fair, you would need to have access to any unit, any part of the complex. If you find that units with children are often put into a certain section or only on a certain floor, that could be a discriminatory practice if there is a pattern of that. Familial status and occupancy limits. So again, this applies to anyone who has legal custody of a child, is attempting to get custody of a child, or is pregnant. Overly restrictive occupancy limits, 2+1 guideline, can be more or less depending on age of occupants and size of unit. So I love occupancy limits. It's very interesting because a lot of people aren't aware of them. So when you apply for an apartment, if you have 3 people living with you, you can apply to a 1 bedroom because the rule of thumb is any bedroom times 2 plus 1 is the state allowed legal occupancy limit. So if you look at this table, you'll see here that 2 times 1 is 2 plus 1 is 3. 2 times 4 is 4 plus, I'm sorry, 2 times 2 is 4. I got ahead of myself. Plus 1 is 5. So in any 2 bedroom, you can have 5, any 3 bedroom, you can have 7, and so on and so forth. So in a 4 bedroom, let's just say 4 bedroom, you can legally have 9 people in a 4 bedroom. So it's important to be aware of your occupancy limits as well, because familial status, primarily, yes, it is children, but just for, a roommate situation, whether it be family members that want to live together or what have you, there are state protections around occupancy limits, and this is the table to refer to. So how we do familial status investigations. So it starts off with selecting a property to investigate, which would be an audit. So we look for pointed language in advertising, things like perfect for 2 people or quiet neighborhood. Or we follow up on a specific property based on specific complaints from potential or current tenants. Then we construct 2 profiles of equally qualified tenants. The only difference is that one is of a protected class and one is not. So it would be an adult with children versus an adult with, adult roommates. And both profiles will have the same number of tenants to see, is it an occupancy thing? Is it truly an occupancy thing? Or is it really a child thing? So we gather information on treatment between the 2 testers and make inferences based on return reports. And then if differential treatment is detected, a secondary series of steps will be taken. So that could look like an educational letter going to a property or even an administrative complaint being filed. So this is an example of an advertisement that we would flag for familial status investigation. So we see here it just lists the number of bedrooms, the number of bathrooms, some basic information about when it was built. And then we go here, right here, excellent for 2 people. So we would see that and we would think, okay, that's a very clear cut. They're stating an occupancy limit on a 2 bedroom. When really, we know a 2 bedroom could legally fit 5, but they're saying it's a hard 2. So then we would construct profiles with people seeking tenancy that are in a group of 3. I actually did have, I ran a test similar to an ad, a test for an ad similar to this, and I chose to do 3 people. So it would be 3 roommates and then a person with 2 children. And we would just see how it shook out. Yeah, I'm trying to see if there's anything else. This ad is also, it could be interesting to do like a disability test here as well. Yeah, this ad you could probably lead with a couple things, but I think the thing that jumps out, the most plainly is the strict occupancy limit. This is a quick and fast, easy way to decide to run an occupancy limit or a familial status test for sure. So that brings me to the question portion of the presentation. Is there any questions? Alrighty. That is the presentation. Thank you for coming.